What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and this is one PC Sim Racer Dude's casual car offline review of F1 2018 on PC. So here are the ground rules and the background of this review. I'm playing on PC, as I already mentioned, with a steering wheel, no assists, no auto management enabled, the most realistic driving mode on offer, cockpit view with the halo turned on, all the manly good bit stuff there. I'm not touch multiplayer, haven't looked at it, haven't even considered it, not interested. Not the type of game that I'm in multiplayer for. I've also not attempted to deliberately break the game by doing things that you wouldn't do in the course of normal gameplay, or in other words, if you weren't attempting to break the game. And while I'm a sim racer, I did not buy this game expecting or wanting a rival to the various titles that fill that slot far better than what this game does. There's plenty of space on my hard drive. And last but not least, I haven't played a Codemasters F1 game before this. While I haven't been oblivious to the happenings of what's going on with the Codemaster F1 games, I'm not a super big F1 fan who, needs an official F1 game, and it's not something that I'm traditionally all that into. The last F1 game I bought would have been Grand Prix 4 or F1 Challenge 9902. 15 years plus ago at this point. This was really just one of those random, let's take a flyer, try it out for a little bit under 2 hours, and if I don't like it, I'll get a Steam refund. Well, I haven't returned it, and I'm well past 2 hours now. As such, there's one thing you will not hear in this review, and that is the common criticism that these types of yearly sports releases always get. It's the same game as last year. I don't have that perspective, so I cannot comment on that. So, let us begin. I have to say, I am dang near blown away. I mean that. Now let's start with the easy stuff. As for sounds, as usual, I'll put a clip in at the end for you to decide for yourself in your own ears. Personally, I'd say the audio in this game is well done, as you'd expect from a relatively high budget game in 2018. It should sound good. It does sound good. Simple as that. Graphically, well, you're looking at it. I have most every setting turned up to high or ultra high, though of course YouTube will obviously do a number on it. Honestly, I will say that the game looks quite good and surprisingly natural looking, which is not something I typically have said about the Codemasters F1 games from the past, judging from YouTube footage as well as screenshots. Of course, as you'd expect from the official Formula 1 game, the game is heavily presented. Seemingly every time they get the opportunity to remind you it's an F1 game that you're playing, you will be reminded that you are playing an F1 game, including like advertisements at the track for the F1 game that you are playing, which is just mind-blowing right there. And then there are the serious problems with this game. The menus on PC are god-awful. They are clearly designed with consoles and controllers in mind, which is fair enough. I get that consoles and gamepad market is the real driving force of these games anymore. I've made peace with that. I have accepted that. It is what it is. However, the guy who decided nearly everything in the menu should be handled with the F keys need a violent beating with a stick. Or alternatively, you're forced to try and remember which random ass buttons on your steering wheel does what in the menus, or bind buttons on your wheels so that way you can play finger jujitsu just trying to navigate the menus. And of course, basic mouse support? Well, how dare a PC game have such an excessive, wasteful feature? Am I right? No, really, you know what? F1 2018, the latest and greatest from Codemasters, the official Formula 1 game, has in common with a early 1980s DOS text-based adventure game. They have no mouse support. I don't even. And then there is, of course, the camera settings, which I always complain about this, so I have to do it here as well, because this is something that people should be complaining about. The field of view settings are, as usual from Codemasters, a multiplier, which is, it doesn't help. If you're someone who cares enough to go in to change your field of view, you're probably wanting to change your field of views to something very specific to match the setup that you have to get the best experience possible. You probably care if you're going into that menu to change the settings, that setting in particular. And then they just kind of say, well, here you go, we gave you an option, but we're not going to tell you exactly what your field of view is because that'd just be too difficult. The multiplier is functional, yes, but it is a lazy, half-assed development, and it's the same thing with every other game that implements it within the racing sim world. Please fix. I will commend them though on the front of getting the view set up besides that field of view thing. The controls work, you know, it's easy to get dialed in. You have adjustments and up, down, forward and backwards. Field of view you can obviously change as well. You can hide the menus while you're making the adjustments, so it's very easy to get things set up. You don't have to do that hilarious back and forth thing where you make an adjustment, go back, see if it's right, go back, it's not right, you know, yada yada yada, which is nice. I do also like the fact that they added the option to hide the halo within the in-car cockpit camera view. I have not disabled that because the car has a halo, so I'm gonna have to deal with it. But if that's your thing, if it really bothers you, that is an option. And now I will rail against the thing that drives me the most crazy, and that is the game's eagerness to rip control right out of your hands because you can't handle it. Formation laps are in this game. They're also entirely pointless because right as you get about a couple corners before the end of the formation lap, the game will take control right out of your hands regardless of what you're doing at that moment. It's basically going to say, yeah, no, we're not going to allow you to park on the grid because we don't think you can do that, or alternatively, the game just isn't going to allow you to do that because it would blow up the game, cause all sorts of bugs or issues or whatever. So, yeah, you can't do that. All right, you can't handle that. You make a pit stop. You come into the pits, yeah, you can do a manual pit entry and flip on the pit speed limiter, but once you cross the line to get into the official pit road, the game's on autopilot. You basically just sit there. The extent of what you do is hold in the clutch, hit the gas with the right pressure, and then release the clutch. Woo! Yay! Once you get to the pit exit, well, all you do is you press the pit speed limiter. Yay! I thought I asked for manual pit stops. This is not a manual pit stop by any sense of the word. This is automatic pits, only with slight interaction. Joy. Thanks, Codemasters. Thanks. Safety cars. Once again, you do get a drive behind the safety car. You will get a drive through the field and do all the swervies and all that stuff. Yay! Right? Well, as soon as the green flag is about to come out, the game's going to take control out of your hands once again, just because, well, got to make sure everybody's in the right position or some other reason. I don't know why, but it does. And then you can have control back when the game says that, okay, now you're allowed to drive again. I hate it when games rip control forcibly from your hands, and in a game like this, in a racing game, especially one that's trying to take itself somewhat realistically, oh boy, does it really stick out when it just happens in an instant. You're just like, okay, I was changing my settings, but I guess that's not allowed. The formation lap especially is really annoying because you're often changing your settings, either the fuel mix or the ERS settings, to make sure you got everything dialed in, and then the game says nope, takes over from there, and then you're left on the grid as the lights are counting down, and you're just like smashing all of your buttons to get everything set up because the game wouldn't let you set it up where you expected to set it up. Seriously, come on. I can already tell the comments on this one are gonna be 50-50 here, and I know this, and believe me. Hopefully y'all can hear the sound of the laughter in my voice. I'm not super fired up here. Like, this isn't me yelling and raging. It's yelling and raging about just like silly things, admittedly. But it's one of those things where it's like, I just look at this and I'm like, you know, people ask for formation laps and safety cars for years. I know that much. And now to find out that the implementation renders the whole thing entirely pointless, I feel for your guys' struggle out there, but I also wonder, like, how does Codemasters not put two and two together? Like, hey, you know what? People really want formation laps. For some reason, they really want to drive around at about 3/4 speed. I guess we should allow them to do that, but how can we allow them to do that without making it so that way they could screw themselves up while driving 3/4 speed? What? You know, like, if people ask for these features, if people wanted these features, if people are willing enough to take a full lap driving around at 3/4 speed for no other reason than essentially they want the extra immersion and because it's cool, you should probably just trust them to play the game and do what you want them to do, otherwise known as put the car on the grid where it should be and play the game, because that's probably why they wanted the feature. They didn't want the feature so they could drive around 3/4 speed for half of a lap, 3/4 of a lap, 7/8 of a lap, whatever it is. And then you can take over control from them by ripping it right out of their hands in a vigorous, violent fashion, leaving them totally unfulfilled of their gosh darn formation lap. Like, come on. And you may think I'm making a mountain out of a molehill here, but it's just one of those things where you just see this, you see stuff like this, the stuff that I've mentioned here, and you're just like, this game studio has been making racing games specifically for 20 years, if not more. How do they not notice these things? How do they not understand that people ask for these features in racing games for specific reasons, because there's specific people who want these specific things for the reason that they want them, which is because it makes a better package, it makes the experience. They don't want it because they can have the control ripped away at the last minute. That's the exact opposite reason as to why they want them. So why are you doing that? Come on. Seriously, I got totally sidetracked there, but I'm going to leave that in. Anyways, at this point, we've had the appetizers, so here comes the meat. The always important question around these parts of, how does it drive? And is it a sim? No, I would not call this a sim. I also would not call it Simcade. It is a realistic racing game. No more nor less. That is what it is. That is what it is designed to be. A racing game based in realism, but not necessarily chasing it relentlessly, particularly within the driving experience. To call it a sim is to understate the differences between this and the racing sims that are out there on the market. To call it Simcade is to understate where it truly falls, simply in an effort to apply an arbitrary label onto it for some reason or another. As you'd expect from a game of this type, you have the typical racing sim for the mainstream type feel, where the game is designed around being played on a gamepad. Grip that feels absolutely bottomless. And then you go a little bit too far and you have no grip in an instant. Brakes you can smash with reckless abandon until you go a little bit too reckless with your abandon, and then your tires will lock up in an instant. You can get crazy with the throttle, but get a little bit too crazy and the thing's going to step out on you very quickly. There is no progression. It just happens very, very quickly. It is forgiving, but it's not so forgiving that you can be absolutely, totally stupid out there. Everything happens in a hurry. You simultaneously feel in control and out of control, but yet you know, at least if you have reasonable experience and reasonable skill, that you're actually still in a good amount of control and you don't have to worry about things too terribly much, but it's there to keep things interesting. It's safety sealed for your protection. If you're someone coming from the sim racing side of things, you'll pick it up pretty quickly, and as long as you're not one of those sim racing elitists who snob their nose up at everything that isn't their particular sim of choice, you'll be immediately comfortable and immediately familiar, and you'll pick it up and be running on with it and having a blast. After all, I hope you're one of those people who can realize the difference between a game like this and something that's more realistic, and not necessarily get those two conflated and expect different things out of two very different games that are attempting to do things that are very, very different to one another. Alright, this game, Assetto Corsa, R Factor, Automobilista, iRacing, Project Cars 2, whatever, you got plenty of space on your hard drive. Alright? Is what it is. Remember that. As you'd probably expect, being an F1 game, the cars do drive somewhat differently, though for the most part I will say that it does feel very much the same. It's largely cars are slower or faster, or maybe a little bit less grippy here and there. There is differences between the two. You will notice the difference between the Sauber and the Sauber and the Ferrari. You'll notice these things because there is a big difference between the two, but it's not perhaps the difference that you would expect if it were a true super serious, super unrelenting sim, which I wouldn't say I necessarily am surprised by, but it is kind of one of those things where I do wish there was a little bit more personality to the cars between the teams and they were a little bit more unique than what they seem to be. As for the force feedback, well, it's something, I guess, and that's better than nothing. I've yet to find what I'm looking for. I'm yet to find something that I would consider as communicative and working for me, but I've gone ahead and worked around it basically, pretty much, more or less, and that's basically that. I see very few redeeming qualities to the force feedback at this point, other than, well, it tells me when the wheels have grip and the wheels don't have grip, and I guess at its basic level that is what force feedback is good for, so it's done its task somewhat well enough. Now here's the big disclaimer. some of you guys probably just think I just ripped into this game and I just slagged it off and I said it's crap, I run away from it, it's garbage, it doesn't drive good, it's terrible. Not the case. Not the case at all, in fact. For the type of game that this is, which is a realistic racing game, for something that is aiming to have a solid degree of realism for a Formula One car, I think they've actually done a decent job. Yeah, I don't really have a very good feel at all for the limit. I do feel like I'm just kind of guessing. Yeah, the force feedback isn't particularly communicative and, hasn't really helped me, get along with things, but these cars are stupid fast. That's what they do. They have a ton of grip. If you're waiting around for the car to tell you one thing or another, especially in a racing game where you don't have the whole seat of your pants feel, well, you're kind of already behind the curve. You have to be ahead of the car if you want to be able to drive the car because you're not getting that seat of the pants force feedback type of thing. It's just, that's kind of how it is. And that's how these cars are in even the best racing sims out there. Even the Formula Ultimate and Automobilista and the Formula Hybrid and the Assetto Corsa have that same thing where you have to be ahead of the car to be able to drive the car because things happen that fast at these speeds. Now let's move on to the single player side of things, specifically the career mode. There is of course the championship mode where you can assemble your own championship calendar, run the F1 schedule, all that stuff. The standard racing games things you would expect, especially from an official game of a big time official series. But anyways, the career mode. No secret to those of us who haven't paid attention that the career mode is like the thing for single player. You pick a team where you want to drive for, complete certain requirements, get development points, spend them to improve the car. Yada, yada, yada. Pretty simple, straightforward, standard fanfare for that type of mode in this type of game. While it is somewhat fun and makes for a good way to learn tracks, in particular if you are unfamiliar with them, in many cases I have found the requirements to be totally not based in any sort of reality, or alternatively, I am the streakiest driver you will possibly find. Some of the requirements for some tracks are incredibly easy, as in I could not fail them even if I just totally went out there and ham-fisted the thing. Some of them are not even a chance of me getting anywhere near them. For example, the qualifying simulation scenario is very simple. You go as fast as you possibly can in practice simulating a qualifying session, right? Simple, straightforward. In my McLaren career, I found this incredibly easy at Shanghai. I torched the estimated lap time that I was supposed to do by a second and a half without even really trying too terribly hard. It was strangely easy. While at Baku, I couldn't get within a second of that same lap time estimate. What's going on here? Maybe McLaren forgot that they only have a GP 2.5 engine at this stage, so the lap estimate was way out of whack or something. But it's weird. For example, I also struggled at Albert Park, which is a track I figure would suit the McLaren reasonably well because it's not a particular power circuit, or anything like that. And it's a track that I really like. I've done a crap ton of laps. It's a fantastic track. I really enjoy it. Plenty of practice there. Really struggled to get under the requirements. Whereas the next race at Bahrain, track I don't like, a track that's a power circuit that you figure probably wouldn't suit the McLaren nearly as well as Albert Park would, I just absolutely blitzed the requirements like they weren't even there. I don't know why. It's not a track I do well at. It's not a track I like. Didn't do much practice. I certainly did far less practice there because I don't enjoy driving that track. But somehow the requirements worked in my favor. I really don't know. I want to say it's something where the game is trying to get the settings dialed in, but it's overreacting and overcorrecting, but it's certainly puzzling. But in the end, it already seems a bit repetitive, only partway into my first career season in the history of Codemasters F1 games. I'm kind of to the point where I'm kind of not preferring career mode, to be entirely honest, because you do spend just as much time in practice sessions as you do in race sessions, which for some people you will like that. I can understand the appeal of this type of mode, but personally I get to the point where I've had enough practice, but I'm doing these things because the game is telling me to do these things, The systems are built to make these things important, but I just really want to get onto the race. Because the race is why I said I am blown away almost with this game. Again, up till this point, it has probably sounded like I really do not like this game. It probably sounds like at absolute best, I am saying that this game is merely okay. And that might even be generous to the way some of you guys have perhaps interpreted my words. I can understand where you're coming from there, hearing what I've said so far. However, what makes this game as enjoyable as I have found it is the important part. It is the racing. On Track is where this game shines, as that's where it puts the pieces together, and that's what's made this game a winner in my book. In particular, I feel that the race weekend experience and the AI might just approach the greatness that was Grand Prix 4. And that is incredibly high praise coming from me, because I enjoyed the snot out of Grand Prix 4. As you'd expect, even though the game tries its best to minimize these things, you have the proper rules, the virtual safety cars, the safety cars, all the different tire types, the tire strategies, tire allotments. You only get so many tires per race weekend. You know, the parc fermé rules after qualifying, or, well, once you leave out to go do a lap in qualifying, and races that have scripted events where cars are having failures and stuff like that, which keep things exciting and interesting, and make things feel like an actual proper race. Things are actually happening out there on track, and it's a less static, more exciting race than a lot of other games provide. I would like to see just a little bit more chaos. I'm sure there'll probably be a chaos mod out there somewhere that changes some random files to deliver what I'm looking for. But, you know, it's one of those things where the whole experience comes together to feel like you're having an actual race, which is something that oftentimes when I'm playing against AI in a lot of other games, even games that have AI that is fantastic, you don't necessarily feel like, because it doesn't have that whole wrapping to make it feel like it's actually something other than just a random race out of the blue. When I get it set up with AI that provides me a proper, incredible challenge, meaning that I'm having to drive as fast as I possibly can and run a good, clean race to the best of my abilities to bring the car home in the place you would expect it to, you know, it's easily some of the best, most engaging offline racing I've had in a long while. I have to say, I'm really surprised by how well the AI behaves in most situations. Now, there are still times where they will just kind of like drive into the back of you in the middle of the straight for no reason at all, or alternatively some corners where they think there's an opportunity but there's really not an opportunity and is never going to be there, you know. But that's AI, and even the greatest of games, you know, racing AI, you know, for example Grand Prix 4, which is commonly said to be one of the best, and I certainly would not put up too much of an argument, still had moments like that. That just comes with the territory of racing against actual idiots. And that is really the way you should use that flashback function that this game does have, in my eyes, to just kind of undo their stupidity and just pretend it never even happened. And I think, really, it works. I'm actually very much surprised how well it works out there on track, and that's why I really quite like this game. I didn't necessarily go into this expecting to hate this game, but I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I actually have. Oh no, they're gonna take my Sim Racer card away. Oh yeah, I'm running away. I'm running away now. You'll never see me again. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.
back on target soon. Don't wait too long to turn the engine down.